After winning the American presidential election, Donald Trump spoke to UK Prime Minister Theresa May to affirm America's special relationship with Britain and invite her to visit him as soon as possible. The Prime Minister's office stated President-elect Trump set out his close and personal connections with and warmth for the UK, adding he was confident that the special relationship would go from strength to strength. Yet some have raised doubt about the sincerity of Trump and May's new relationship, as the British Prime-Minister seemed to be at the back of the queue in terms of leaders whom Trump wanted to speak to after his stunning election victory. Mr. Trump had spoken to 9 leaders before calling Mrs. May, sparking concern about the state of that special relationship between the British and the President-elect. Nigel Farage, a key supporter of Trump's campaign, says Trump is very aware of negative statements the British Prime Minister and others made about Trump during his election campaign, and implied there could be bad consequences, perhaps for British business and the British people, though he did not say exactly what these consequences might be. Farage has offered to work with the UK government and Donald Trump to provide introductions and start the necessary process of mending fences. How will Donald Trump's election affect Britain and Europe's relationship with America? And is the West becoming anti-immigrant? Simple questions with important answers. With Donald Trump as President-elect of the United States and Britain leaving the European Union, is the public worried or optimistic about the future, and why?
Donald Trump is an interesting one only because of the fact that his racist comments and these racist slurs that he's made don't sit well with me. But he's a businessman and he probably will run America like a business, probably make more money for them or get them out of debt at least.
Well, I want to be positive because at the end of the day, I have to live with the result of everything. So I would really like for Donald Trump's presidency to be a good one, even though I have some concerns about his policy positions. But at the end of the day, whatever America does is going to have an impact on us.
For France, the most important factor will be who wins the presidency next year. And then afterwards, we'll have a much better idea of what the future holds. But you have to stay optimistic.
I'm a pretty optimistic person by nature, so neither Trump nor Brexit is going to change that, or my optimism for France's future.
I feel very optimistic after Trump's win. I was afraid Clinton may win the US elections. Trump has won instead, and I'm happy about his victory because he's an entrepreneur. And I think countries should be run by entrepreneurs.
The US will gradually distance itself from Europe's hottest issue and will tend to isolate itself. However, my take is that relations between Europe, Russia and the US will improve in the coming years.
Quite pessimistic. It seems like we're a bit in the same era of the 1930s, where things were getting worse and worse and worse up until the Second World War. So yeah, I'm really a bit afraid of that, and I think it's really up to us, the people, to make sure it doesn't happen again, and to take actions ourselves to avoid it.
Actually, I don't see any big reason to be very optimistic here. And if I'm asking from myself why this kind of situation has been delivered, then I think that responsibility carry actually politicians.
I'm both worried and optimistic. I'm worried because I sense that the economy, which has really not recovered from the financial crash in 2008, is in a very perilous situation. And I'm expecting that the rather limited economic growth we've seen in Western Europe and North America could come to a halt very easily. I'm also worried by the rise of the far right in Europe and an anti-migrant ticket. At the same time, I think we have to balance that with there are forces looking for the sorts of change which I would like to see. I think that those forces are represented by Jeremy Corbyn here in Britain, by organisations like Podemos here in Spain and elsewhere. So we're seeing two things happening simultaneously, particularly in Europe. Yes, the rise of the far right, but also there is a rise of a radical left putting forward a different agenda and countering that anti-migrant, anti-Muslim discourse.
The victory of Brexit in the so-called United Kingdom, and now the recent victory of Donald Trump at the US president election, what this signals is actually what I've been discussing for more than a year, is what I call the new fascism or the 21st century's fascism. We're at the beginning stages of that, its initial emergence. And what it signals is nothing to be optimistic about, except perhaps for some sections of the ruling circles in the West. Everything to be not only pessimistic, but this is an emergency situation as we go forward.
Many Western leaders have been very critical of Donald Trump in the lead up to his victory. How does the public feel his election will affect Europe's relationship with America?
I think it all depends on Trump, on his attitude to the rest of the world. If he carries on as the way he was before the elections, then no, it's not going to work.
I think it's safe to say that Europe is right to have some trepidation about how he's spoken, and I think ironically it seems Germany that's taken the lead in being more liberal when the rest of the axis has gone the other way.
Well, at the end of the day, after the elections, Theresa May was very cordial in her response to Trump. She was very polite, but in the end, it's going to be his behavior whether or not he wants to decide on the policies that he's been so campaigning about, whether he's going to go forward with them. And then Britain is going to take a stand and say, well, we believe in this and this is not with our beliefs.
I think Trump is very xenophobic. He doesn't want people from other cultures coming in and ruining what he perceives the idea of the American dream. I think that world relations will become very strained under Trump's administration, especially because it's a Republican House, Senate and presidency.
It's difficult to say how Europe should react to Trump. We'll have to wait and see. But he doesn't represent all Americans.
It's possible that the election of Trump could change Europe's relations with the US. France's president said he was pretty surprised and worried about the election results. For my part, Trump and Clinton were very similar ideologically.
I think that the relations between the United States and the European Union and France have been pretty stable for decades. I really don't believe that a goal of Trump's foreign policy will be able to overturn all of this.
Everyone in Europe watched the US election and realizes that Trump will reorient the entire global order a little bit, including US relations with Europe. But let's not exaggerate. There is a balance of power in the US, and it's not as if Trump is a king who can do whatever he wants.
I was against Hillary Clinton because she is married to a former US president, and it gave me the impression that her candidacy was familistic rather than meritocratic.
Well, probably Trump wouldn't like it, but I think it's important if we want to collaborate with him that we make clear how do we want to collaborate and on what terms.
Yeah, the first impression or understanding of the situation is like this, but actually I think the situation as well is quite unpredictable.
No, I don't think it will. I think that politicians say nasty things about each other all the time, but then when it comes down to it, they usually find a way to smooth things over, because if they didn't, they would lose trade partners and so on. So
I think it is going to affect the European Union relationship with Donald Trump. It was rather telling that the foreign ministers of the EU convened an emergency meeting to discuss the election, the consequences of the election of Donald Trump. It was also telling that both Britain and then France refused to attend that meeting because, of course, they're the two closest powers to America. They're the military powers in Europe. Germany is the economic power, but in terms of military crowds, Britain and France. And the fact that they didn't go to that summit signaled that they're prepared to work with Trump and will stick to their alliance with the United States come what may.
In this period where leading sections of the Western states feel that they have to go in the direction of fascism to try and maintain their domination and the status quo, in such a situation, every social political contradiction on the planet is intensified on hyperdrive. So that means inevitably that the contradictions between the Western states will increase. Now they've been increasing and they've been present anyway. The only issue is, since the Second World War, the Western states made an agreement not to fight each other and to unite with each other in general and to focus on fighting the so-called Third World and the socialist camp. Now the socialist camp has gone, we've seen the contradictions between the Western states intensify, and it was manifest even back in the breakup of the former Yugoslavia in the 1990 NATO war against Serbia. And the inter-imperialist contradictions, as it's known, have been developing and increasing.
People have said the reasons behind Brexit and Donald Trump's election are similar. What does the public believe lies behind these results?
Possibly. I think it all stems to ignorance and not doing enough research. People jump on the bandwagon, they go by the first instinct instead of actually looking at the issues and how it can affect them. And I'm afraid they didn't do enough of that.
Just a general everyday person is unhappy with how things are running and they want change. Change is a very difficult thing for most people to accept.
I don't understand why people think there's similarities, because they're two different elections. However, I think what people are trying to get at is the way that they calculate the votes. Maybe they're not done. It's not straightforward. So they feel that maybe the people that voted for him most didn't necessarily win, didn't necessarily get the result that they want.
The silent majority, everyone was hyped up and saying that, oh, we don't like Donald Trump because he's a sexist, he's a xenophobe, he's everything. But at the end of the day, on election day, what we saw was that a large majority of whites, male and female, voted for him, while all the other minorities, everyone else who made up America, voted against him. What that says is that America is still very much a racist, homophobic and sexist country.
I think, as much as I don't like to believe it, I think racism has a lot to play with it. I think Brexit has made it possible to view your opinions on racism and to fight for what you don't think is right, but what you think is right, but you've never had the chance to express before. So yeah, I do think it's helped them massively to voice their opinion.
I think it's really people tired of the same. They're tired of the establishment, they're tired of what's happening. They're tired of always getting just another politician who's got the same agendas with a different face. They wanted the change of Brexit, they wanted the change of Trump, they wanted something different. Whether or not it's good, I think that's the reason why it happened.
General slowdown in economic growth has everyone looking for new solutions, but I'm not sure that Brexit will be one of them. It doesn't seem to have given an immediate lift to their economy, but such decisions take at least 4 or 5 years to evaluate.
Neoliberalism and capitalism produce major inequalities by their very natures, and this has produced a widespread feeling of discontent across Europe and the United States. The majority of wealth is concentrated in a tiny percentage of the population, and that leaves the average person grasping for a leader who can promise significant changes, like Trump or the leaders of Brexit.
I think there is a relationship because now England shows that there is a Brexit and some kind. I know that probably their influence from England and the United States probably have some kind of a politics relation, so it could be after this globalization, now it comes a little bit other way around.
I think some of it is sort of, and I don't like the term of the right-wing media, but what sells more tickets at the fairground? Is it the tickets to the guess your weight machine or the ghost train? And I think if you're being fed that by the newspapers, by sides of the media, you're going to follow that line, and you are going to loathe thy neighbour in a way.
I think we have to be careful of the way, particularly the Trump vote has been painted. It's been said that really this was a white working class vote. If you look at the statistics, with the exception of the Midwest car states, which I'll come back to, it wasn't. It was mainly middle class, quite well educated, high school educated people voting for Trump. And we should remember that this was decided by a relatively small number of people. And that Trump did get a majority of white women to vote for him, and incredibly 27% of Latinos, despite his pledge to build a wall with Mexico. But where I think he was able to win in states like Pennsylvania, in Ohio and so on, was by going there and saying, for instance in Michigan, he would bring back jobs which have been lost in the auto plants. And one of his speechwriters came up with a really great line, which was, once we built cars in Michigan, but you couldn't drink the water in Mexico. Now you can drink you can't drink the water in Flint, and they build cars in Mexico.
I think there's two factors behind the results that brought Brexit fascism to victory and Trump fascism to victory. The two things are, one is that there's divisions amongst the ruling circles. Some of them really don't want Brexit, and some of them really don't want Trump. But the strongest factions, an alliance of factions between the ruling circles do want Brexit and have delivered it, and they do want Trump and they've delivered that. And if they want Le Pen fascism in France, they'll deliver that. And if they want similar in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, they'll do that. The people are weak, the people have no power. It's the ruling circles that are driving all this forward. The second factor, which is important in this, connected but junior and secondary to the first factor, is the way racism has been the central motivating force of colonialism that has been inculcated on a mass level in terms of the Western population.
Some political commentators believe Trump's election will help Britain, as he supported Brexit, and this might boost Anglo-American trade deals. Yet the British public was told by Barack Obama that Britain could be at the back of the queue if it leaves the European Union, exactly the opposite of Trump's promise. Either route will affect the fortunes of British business and British citizens in a post-Brexit environment. With the election of Donald Trump, Britain voting to leave the EU, and the rise of far-right parties in Europe, does the public think the West is becoming anti-immigrant?
Yeah. I don't think it's becoming. I think it has always been, and I think that's a real worry.
Yes, I do see that. When you tell me you're going to build a fence to keep immigrants out, persons trying to make a better living, I thought that the great thing about America was the American dream. The white picket fence, the lovely job, and just being equal to everyone else. When you say you're going to do that and then put a ban on Muslims from coming into the country, how is that telling me that as an immigrant I can achieve the American dream when I'm not even allowed in the country?
If I'm being perfectly honest, I think it's always been anti-immigrant, and I think that comes down to a lot of the reporting, a lot of what's shown in the media, and a lot of how people truly feel.
I think the West isn't becoming anti-immigrant. I think people who are anti-immigrant in the West are just becoming more vocal.
I don't think it's a question of rising xenophobia in Europe. I think it's about coming up with a concrete plan to properly regulate immigration. I'm French, and if I leave tonight to go work in another country, well, I must have a work visa. So it's a question of following the laws and using the taxes to help people in France who are also working and contributing to the system.
Unfortunately, there's a rising part of the Western population which is simply scared of different people in general. This could be balanced by a public policy which better explains the events that have produced so many refugees, and also how immigrants are a key part in the history of every nation.
I think because people aren't really happy and financially it's going worse these days, that there's a natural tendency of being afraid, and with that being afraid or uncomfortable, I think it's easy to find immigrants as the reason for what is happening, or make it a reason. So I think it's kind of that logical that people are in.
I don't think we are. I think the sign's there that we are, but I think it's more that it is that, like I say, with the newspapers and what you read and do you actually believe it? Probably not, but it's almost the thing that you have to say is that you blame everything on immigrants and immigration, whereas I look out my window and I don't see that.
I think that we are seeing a constant anti-migrant policy, and we should remember this isn't just a consequence of the rise of the far-right parties like the Front National, who might well be in a position to win the presidency in France next year, but it's a consequence of governmental and European Union policy. And I think we have to say that the European Union militarising the frontiers along the Mediterranean to keep migrants out, migrants fleeing wars and chaos caused by the West, caused by Europe, has helped create that. And the official line has always been that these migrants aren't human beings seeking escape from war. It's always been that they are a problem.
It's not a case that the West has become anti-immigrant. The West, which is a colonial concept in itself anyway, it's a genocidal colonial concept. The West has always been anti-immigrant. The West has always been anti-woman, anti-working class, anti-African, anti-Asian, etc. The only thing changing now is that this which they hid behind their democratic, human rights, multicultural facade and charade has been now taken away. Is that a good thing for us? No, not particularly, because fascists uniting together against us when we are not prepared at all is not a good situation for us. It means our children are attacked. It means our women and elderly are attacked. It means people are killed. We already have martyrs, Joe Cox, Eric Joswick. The sister with the hijab lost her pregnancy horrifically in the racist attack. We have martyrs already. There's other martyrs we don't know about, also in the United States and across the West.
Does the public feel the world benefits more from a strong British and American alliance? Or is it time for Britain to distance itself from an America led by President Trump?
I think Britain naturally will distance itself from the US, and especially if Donald Trump continues with the rhetoric that he has. The problem is that all politicians lie. All politicians lie. And they all lie to get in power. And then when they're in power, they do something else.
Does the world benefit? Well, I think the only people that will benefit from a British and American alliance is Britain and America, in fairness, because everything they're doing is going to be slightly in favour to the policies they want. So I believe that no, it's not benefiting the whole world. It's only going to benefit a select few people. America and Britain being the main two people that it will help.
Like I said before, I think we have no choice. We have no other power anywhere else but to go to China or India, so it's one or the other. Only time will tell which option they go for.
At the economic and financial levels, the US and England are very much intertwined. So I don't think the arrival of Trump will change their bilateral relations very significantly.
I don't think it would be a very good idea for the UK to separate itself from the United States, because the US is the world's largest economy, after all. That doesn't sound like a winning bet. It's true, it would give the UK a certain independence, but there would be consequences which are not very good.
Well, the world has not benefited from a close British-American alliance. That is an alliance which has helped create chaos around the world. Everyone knows about Iraq, but we should also be talking about Libya, where Western intervention has created complete chaos, and the West doesn't seem to be bothered at all that just on the other side of the Mediterranean the country is falling apart. Britain will be far better finding its own way in the world and breaking from this slavish alliance. We would benefit from reducing our arms expenditure, which is a consequence of our membership of NATO and our alliance with America, and using that money to benefit our own people. We would also benefit from not being involved in these escapades like the war in Iraq or the intervention in Libya or in Syria just now. And we could begin to build up alliances with other countries around the world rather than the United States of America.
The victory of Brexit fascism here and the victory of Trump fascism in the United States signals not a yawning gap between these two states, but actually a uniting process between these two states. Because we had Nigel Farage, who positioned himself as the official political go-between between the London and Washington administrations. That was accepted, and actually it was proposed, and the Tories accepted that, and they had to backtrack because it was obviously a total undemocratic fascist move. So that is an indication that this new fascism is bringing together the two countries, which has seen the two new historical victories of fascism.
Two of the UK's most senior politicians, Prime Minister Theresa May and Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, were highly critical of Donald Trump throughout his election campaign. According to one of Trump's key allies, Nigel Farage, President-elect Trump has not forgotten or forgiven May or Johnson for their comments. How will this affect relations between the US and the UK? Some say Trump's America and Brexit Britain will both become less influential in the world. The future for both powerful states is uncertain, especially if it turns out they cannot even work with each other.